Do you remember this line from Skyfall? How much do you know about fear, Mr. Bond? All there is, he answers. To rephrase this question, let me ask you, how much do you know about risk? Well, you are sure that you know what I'm talking about here. But how much do you really know about it? Or let me put my question another way. Do you know how much your attitude to risk really shapes your life and destiny? I'm sure that if you think about this, your answer would probably be not too much. If you knew, perhaps it could change something about your life. Perhaps quite a lot, in fact. Let me ask you another question, or rather two questions. What is the biggest risk you ever took in your life, and why did you do that? If you answer that one, I would actually know quite a good deal about you and the kind of person that you are. So unless you want me to know that, do not rush to answer the question in the chat. Leave the answer to yourself. In this video, I will be asking you various questions, not to hear or read your answers, but just to make you think about the things that you may not have thought about in the past. It's known as the Socratic method, which is still widely used in American law and other schools. Its goal is to make the listeners find the way to the answer themselves rather than just being given the ready answer. I hope that by the end of this video, you will understand how much you can change in your life by simply understanding your attitude to risk. To help you overcome your shyness, I can answer the question that I asked a few seconds ago about myself. Without going into much detail, I will just say that the biggest risk that I took in my life was in a situation where I faced another risk arising from status quo that seemed even bigger. So I took the risk in question to hedge against what seemed to be a bigger risk to me. In other words, I wasn't taking much risk at all. That is also the answer to the second part of my question as to why. Anyway, this is enough to give you an idea about the kind of person that I am. I'm just like most of you, very risk averse. I usually take risks only when I have to, when I am reasonably confident that it is worth it, what's known as calculated risks. What I want to demonstrate to you is not just how your attitude to risk shapes your life, but how you can change your life, hopefully for the better, if you can rationalize and master your attitude to risk. Because the fact is that in my estimate, our attitude to risk is usually about 70% about who we are, our innate qualities, and just about 30% about our experience. Can we change this proportion to get a more rational attitude to risk? Should we? I say yes to both questions, and I shall explain why. In fact, I want to demonstrate how your risk aversion can actually help you achieve success. In other words, your risk aversion can be an asset if you can use it smartly. It's undeniable that most successful people in the world are those who have taken risks. We know that risks are the reverse side of rewards. But there is no direct correlation between the amount of risk taken and the amount of reward gained. People do not become billionaires because they borrow billions of dollars. No one would ever lend them that much money until they've proven themselves to be very successful. So there is more to success than appetite for risk, but there is no success until you've taken some risks. The secret of success is to take well-calculated risks and to take them intelligently. I will cite a very simple example that most of you are familiar with. It's about how you invest your savings. There are basically two simple ways to invest money into an interest-bearing bank account, such as an ISA in the UK, or in stocks, either directly by purchasing stock or through various investment funds, etc. I have investments in both, so I can cite you figures related to my own investment over the last 3 to 4 years. The best interest I could ever secure on my ISA or bank account was just above 4%, short of 5%, and it's now going down as the rates are being progressively lowered by the Bank of England and other central banks. The average growth rate of my investment through various funds over the same period was over 15%. And for my directly held stock, mainly US companies, the average market value has grown by more than 30% just over the last 3 years, with some stocks almost doubling in price. I have a diversified portfolio. Of course, the difference is that interest on your bank account is real money, regularly added to your account, and is virtually risk-free, except for a remote risk of your bank going bust. On the other hand, the growth of the value of stock is only notional until you actually sell it, and we know that it can plunge at any time without any notice. So there is considerable risk involved. Is this risk worth the reward? I think the figures speak for themselves. You just have to do it intelligently, having a clear investment strategy, something that financial advisors can help you with. I'm not a financial advisor, in case you doubt. Attitude to risk also explains why most people prefer the security of employment to the risks and the vagaries of business. It's basically the same as putting your money into a saving account, except that in this case, instead of money, you put in your skills and qualifications, and you can expect a modest but pretty guaranteed interest on your capital in the form of annual pay raise. In this case, it is the employer who takes all the risks. If the business is not successful and the revenue doesn't grow or even falls, not necessarily because there is something wrong about the business, but perhaps due to unfavorable market conditions, he still has to pay your salary. Moreover, governments in some countries, including the UK, are making it more difficult for employers to fire an employee, thus increasing their risks even more. Is this fair? Now, let me ask you another question. Do you regret not having done something in your life because of the fear of failure? If so, did it change your attitude to risk? The truth of the matter is that sometimes we make bad decisions because of the risks involved or out of fear of failure. I want to demonstrate to you how you can avoid this without radically changing who you are by rationalizing your attitude to risk. I'm not talking here about protecting yourself against the risk, for example, through some sort of insurance. Commercial insurance is not available for all risks and could be prohibitively expensive if it were. Let's look at some specific risks by way of example. There are two main parameters in any risk. First, it is the nature and magnitude of the loss or failure that might occur if the certain action is taken or not taken. A second, it is the likelihood or probability of it occurring if the action is taken or not taken. So when we refer to an action being risky, we usually mean both of these parameters. But for a better understanding and appreciation of the risk, we should look at each of them separately. A few examples. First, lottery tickets. When you buy one, you take a very high risk of not winning, but the actual loss, that is the price of the ticket, as different from the potential reward, is quite low, unless you buy a lot of them. Buying many lottery tickets slightly increases the probability of winning, but not to a material degree, unless you buy all of the majority of tickets. But in that case, even if you win, you are unlikely to recover the cost of the tickets, it's just the economy of lottery. And so, unless you buy 100% of tickets, your risks remain high, even with a relatively high probability of winning, because if you do not, you lose a great deal of money. In this case, the low cost with the high probability of loss transforms into the high cost with a low probability of loss. There is no insurance against this risk. If you buy an airplane ticket, you take a risk of dying in an air crash. The risk is statistically very low, very similar to the chances of winning in a lottery. But the magnitude of loss, your life, is extremely high. Like in the case of lottery, there is no insurance against this risk. That is insurance against death. If you start a business on your own, there is a rather high risk of failure. Both the probability of failure and its likely cost, what you invest into it, are quite high in this case. Like in the other two cases, there is no insurance against this risk. Yet many of you buy both airplane and lottery tickets, but much fewer people go into business. Why? Well, the answer is obvious. In the last case, the risk is high both in terms of magnitude of loss and its probability, whereas in the other two cases, either the probability of loss, air crash, or its magnitude, the price of a lottery ticket is very low. So you must have much more appetite for risk to start a business than to fly an airplane or to buy a lottery ticket. Or must you? Suppose you have a great idea for a business, or just know what you want to do, which you cannot do as an employee, and it cannot be just a hobby that you can do in your spare time. Usually, it's not the only choice you have. Perhaps you are employed full time, and although you may not enjoy your job, it provides you with the security that you can't expect if you start a business from scratch. Perhaps you have financial obligations, a family to look after, a mortgage to pay. It all increases your risks because you have so much to lose. And as much as you like your business idea, there is no one in the world who can give you any sort of guarantee that you will succeed, even if the potential rewards are very attractive. Difficult dilemma, isn't it? You might compare this to a lottery, but the resemblance is deceptive, both because the stakes are much higher and because the outcome is not entirely beyond your control, not a matter of pure mathematical probability. So, what do you do? How do you overcome the fear? Or how did you overcome it if you were in such a situation? I think most risk averse people would balk at it, preferring the security of employment if it isn't yet secure. But is this a correct decision? A fatalist might say yes because that's what they are, so that's their destiny. But if you're not a fatalist, can you take a more rational approach? Or you can try to mitigate your risks without giving up on the idea. For example, you can still try doing this in your spare time as a hobby. In this case, to have a viable chance of success, you will probably have to steal on your employment time or spend much less time with your family. The cost of both may be quite high. You can damage your current career if not been fired. You can damage, if not destroy, your family life. Yet your chances of succeeding in business are likely to be rather low just because you cannot give your business as much of your time and energy as it requires. Even if you go in full time, giving up on the job if you have one, your risk aversion can cause you to make decisions that are counterproductive as they can reduce your chances of success and increase your risks instead of reducing them. For example, you can decide to go for a partnership with someone not because it's necessary for your business's success, but because you think it will reduce your risks. These are just some examples of how your attitude to risk can make you do unreasonable things instead of helping you achieve your goals. What is called risk mitigation is not necessarily a good strategy for dealing with the risks. Is there a better strategy to address risks? In the early example about lottery, I explained why buying many lottery tickets is a bad way of reducing your risks of losing, because you actually increase your losses more than the probability of winning. We know this because we know how lotteries work. There is no other successful strategy in lottery than simply figuring out what is the acceptable amount of loss you can take. If you are reasonable, you will never stake all your savings on winning in a lottery, rather like the protagonist of Pushkin's Queen of Spades staking his life on winning in a card game. In other cases where there is no clear formula for calculating the risk without mathematical precision, you can still use a similar approach. You simply leave the calculation of probabilities out of the equation. The first element of your risk strategy is determining the level of loss that you can assume without destroying your life. Then you have to see if that amount of loss or investment is sufficient for achieving your goals. If we are talking about starting a business, it involves matching the expected cost of doing so with the maximum amount of loss that you can take without destroying your life. If you can do this matching, this would be the first key element of your risk-taking strategy. It often happens in reality, as it happened to me, that once you've reached your acceptable level of loss, you are still not sure if your business has failed. The only way to do so is to invest more money and time, thus increasing the amount of potential loss above the initial assessed level. So you have to do this exercise again, but in this case you will probably be in a better position because you will know more about your business and may have a better assessment of the probability of success or failure. In other words, you might be able to calculate your risks more precisely than you were able at the outset. The chances are that at this point you will have a better sense of where it's going and will be more confident about your business. So you may be prepared to take more risk rather than giving up and absorbing the loss. That means that you have made a major step in rationalizing your attitude to risk by taking a well-calculated risk. Let me ask you another question. What is better, to regret having taken the risk or not having taken it? Only if you've done the latter, i.e. have taken the risk, will you usually know if that was the right decision. This is how you overcome the irrationality of your risk aversion. If you succeed, you will not regret it. If you lose, will you regret? Perhaps you will, perhaps you will not. My bet is that unless you've taken a huge and reckless risk, which is extremely unlikely if you're risk averse, you will not, because you will have gained valuable experience and gained in self-esteem compared to where you have forgone an opportunity out of fear of failure. At least such has been my experience. I hardly ever regretted having taken the risks, but I do regret not having taken them when I should have. Moreover, having made a bold move, even if you do not succeed in what was your original goal, chances are that new opportunities will open up to you or which you would not have been otherwise aware. Just try and see. It is by taking risks that you rationalize your attitude to risk. You cannot rationalize it if you take no risk at all. It would be pure cowardice. Going back to the example of lottery and airplane tickets, will you buy a lottery ticket again if you won a huge jackpot? Will you fly again if you survived a major air crash like the sole survivor of the recent Air India disaster? You can answer for yourself, but if you are rational, you will take into account the fact that the probability of the same ever happening again is not just remote, it's virtually non-existent. Finally, the last point that I hinted to earlier when I said that your risk aversion can be an asset to your on your route to success. When you take risks being risk averse and avoid the traps mentioned earlier, i.e. doing stupid things just to placate your fear of failure, you will make every effort to succeed because there is so much at stake for you. So your odds of success will increase relative to both the people who take no risks at all and people who take risks because they don't care, don't fear failure. There is quite a lot of literature and teaching on how to manage risks within business, which has grown into a whole discipline or even science. This is just one of the many books written on the subject, looking at it from every possible angle. But what the science generally overlooks or skims over is the fundamental human dimension of risk perception as largely a matter of psychology. It focuses on managing or mitigating risks, not on overcoming the fear of risk or failure. Yet, as I try to demonstrate, managing or mastering your attitude to risk is no less important than managing risks themselves. In fact, it can be an effective way to achieve success in your life. If you like this video and are interested in subject matter, please subscribe to my channel. There'll be more videos on related subjects. I hope to see you soon.